If you had to pick the world's most powerful weapon back in the 18th century, maybe you'd think of a cannon or a massive warship. But our sources today suggest something really different. It wasn't about destruction at all. It was a clock.
A clock, right. Seems strange, but this device, built for precision, actually ended up letting empires redraw the entire map of the world.
So today we're doing a deep dive into this pattern we see again and again in history. These huge leaps forward, crossing oceans safely, running global finance today. They aren't really about lone heroes figuring it all out.
No, not at all. It's about achieving synchronization. It's about getting everyone, everything, onto the same shared grid. And our mission today is to trace how that synchronization evolved. We'll start with how figuring out time basically solved a massive geography problem, and then we'll track how these big technical grids like GPS actually depend on this invisible stuff, the laws, the standards, the systems, what we're calling social scaffolding.
Right. And you'll see why this popular idea of just going off-grid is, well, mostly fiction when you look at how interconnected things really are.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where did this urgent need for synchronization really hit home? Let's go back to the early 1700s. Navigating north-south, latitude, that was okay. Sailors could manage it with tools like the sextant, some basic math.
Yeah, latitude wasn't the killer. But longitude, figuring out your east-west position, that was pure guesswork. Seriously dangerous guesswork. You were essentially sailing blind.
And that blindness,
Yeah.
it led to some absolutely catastrophic losses, things that were totally preventable.
The classic example, the one our sources really zero in on, is the Scilly naval disaster. October 1707, Admiral Sir Cloudesley Shovel, he's leading this big fleet back home from Gibraltar. But they had weeks of bad weather, clouds, couldn't take readings, and the officers just completely miscalculated where they were.
You genuinely thought they were safe, right? Sailing up the English Channel, almost home.
That's what they believed. Instead, they were dozens and dozens of miles off course, and they were heading straight for the Isles of Scilly, notorious for shipwrecks, just incredibly rocky and dangerous.
Oh, wow.
And at night, 4 major warships hit those rocks, including Shovel's own flagship, the HMS Association. It went down almost instantly. It took about 1,400 men with it.
Just like that. Good grief. The total numbers are just staggering.
Yeah, somewhere between 1,600, maybe even 2,000 sailors died in a single night.
This wasn't combat. This was just getting lost.
Exactly, a navigation error. It was a massive national humiliation for Britain. The insurance markets in London were trembling, and it finally pushed Parliament in 1714 to create the Longitude Prize, a huge reward for anyone who could solve this.
They had to solve it. It was crippling them.
Right. And it's really important to understand why it was so hard. The key insight is that longitude is basically the same problem as knowing the time. If you knew the precise local time where your ship was, say, based on the sun at noon, and you also knew the precise time back at a fixed reference point, like the Royal Observatory in Greenwich.
Then the difference between those two times tells you how far east or west you are.
Precisely. Every hour of difference equals 15 degrees of longitude. So the solution wasn't necessarily fancier math, it was a machine. A clock that could keep perfect Greenwich time, even on a rolling ship, for months.
And that's where John Harrison comes in. Our sources paint him as this really interesting figure, a carpenter from Yorkshire. Self-taught, not some university academic.
Yeah, he thought like an engineer. He knew it was a mechanical problem. He needed to build a clock that wouldn't be thrown off by the ship pitching and rolling, or by changes in temperature and the salty sea air.
Which was a huge challenge because clocks back then were delicate things, right? Pendulums would get messed up, metal parts would warp.
Oh, absolutely. They were like fragile divas, as you said, totally unreliable at sea. Harrison spent decades, literally decades, tinkering and refining his designs. And finally, he produced his masterpiece, the H4 chronometer, in 1761. It wasn't some big grandfather clock. It was compact, like a large pocket watch, and incredibly resilient.
And the test voyage proved it, didn't it?
It really did. They took H4 on a trip to Jamaica. After 81 days at sea, it had lost only 5 seconds. 5 seconds.
Incredible. So the longitude problem, this centuries-old deadly puzzle, solved by a carpenter who built a better clock.
Exactly. He treated time as an engineering challenge.
And that clock, Harrison's H4, it fundamentally changed the world. It took the vast, terrifying, unpredictable oceans and made them predictable, manageable. Now, fast forward, we carry that same core idea synchronization across distance, but scaled up massively. It's in our pockets. We call it GPS.
Right. We've gone from Harrison's clever brass gears to atomic clocks orbiting the Earth on satellites. These clocks are accurate to, well, billionths of a second. Your phone listens for signals from several of these satellites, does some complex calculations factoring in Einstein's relativity, believe it or not, and triangulates your position, that little blue dot on your map.
It's the same principle as H4, carrying a perfect time standard, just taken to an almost unimaginable level of precision.
Right. Exactly. And think about the contrast with life before GPS. Navigation was this mix of skill, art, and honestly, a lot of guesswork. Sextants, slide rules.
Supply chains, delivery schedules, military planning, so much uncertainty.
Right. And our sources highlight this stark fact from World War II. Studies by the U.S. military found that only about 20% of bombs actually fell within 1,000 feet of their targets.
20%, that's shockingly inaccurate.
And at higher altitudes, it dropped even lower, maybe 5% accuracy. Think about the consequences: enormous civilian casualties, wasted resources, military inefficiency, all because they couldn't precisely synchronize location and action.
Which explains why GPS started as a military project.
Absolutely. It began in the 1970s, a U.S. Department of Defense initiative. They needed it for guiding submarines accurately, for targeting bombers, for coordinating tanks. It wasn't originally designed for you to find the nearest coffee shop.
But now, it's become the absolute nervous system of modern civilization. That shift from a Cold War weapon to the metronome of global commerce is just fascinating.
And the economic impact is just colossal. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars added to global GDP every year. Think about modern farming tractors guided by GPS steer with centimeter precision, saving massive amounts of fuel, fertilizer, seed.
Power grids use GPS time signals to keep the flow of electricity perfectly synchronized across huge regions, preventing blackouts.
Financial markets rely on it to timestamp trades down to the nanosecond. Airlines use it to optimize flight paths, saving millions of gallons of fuel.
It's basically network-centric operations,
Yeah.
but applied to everything. Harrison synchronized one ship at a time. GPS synchronizes millions of users, trucks, planes, systems, all dancing to the same clock in the sky. It collapses the complexity of time and location for everyone.
But the more dependent we become on this incredibly complex grid, the more vulnerable we are if it hiccups. There's a systemic fragility there.
And we got a taste of that fragility not too long ago, didn't we? Something called the GPS weak number rollover.
Yes, in 2019, it was a relatively minor event in the grand scheme, but a really sharp reminder.
What exactly happened? It sounds technical.
Think of it like a digital counter in the GPS system that tracks the week number. It only uses 10 bits, which means it can count up to 124 weeks, about 19.7 years. In April 2019, that counter hit its maximum and reset back to zero.
Yeah.
So for some older GPS receivers, they suddenly thought it was 19.7 years earlier.
Ah, I see. So the time signal itself was fine, but the date interpretation got scrambled for some devices.
Exactly. And systems that rely on that precise date and time got confused. Some navigation systems showed the wrong date, maybe even the wrong position temporarily. Telecom networks had glitches, some financial systems, even things like weather balloons.
So not a catastrophe, but definitely a wobble.
A wobble, yes. But it perfectly illustrates what the theorist Paul Virilio talked about. Every new technology inevitably carries its own unique potential for accidents, what he called its integral accident. Harrison's clock solved getting lost, but it fostered overconfidence. GPS enables incredible coordination, but it creates this deep, systemic fragility if the signal is lost or disrupted.
Which brings us to a really crucial point you raised earlier. These technical grids, clocks, satellites, they need hardware, but they also need something less visible, the societal scaffolding to hold them up. And we often miss that scaffolding because, well, we love stories about the lone hero, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. That myth, the rugged individualist, the self-sufficient frontiersman, the cowboy riding off into the sunset, it's powerful. But it also makes us kind of blind to how interconnected and interdependent we really are. Our sources really take this myth apart, that supposedly self-sufficient pioneer. In reality, they were operating on a grid built and funded by others, mostly the government.
How so? What specific support did they rely on?
Well, think about it. They often followed roads surveyed by the government. They claimed land distributed through federal acts, the Louisiana Purchase, the Homestead Act. They relied on supply chains, which were often protected by military forts. Even the agricultural knowledge they used often came from research done at land-grant universities funded by the government. The idea of being truly off-grid was basically impossible. They were on the grid of the state.
Okay, but what about the cowboy? Surely that's the ultimate symbol of rugged individualism.
That's the myth, the real cowboy, historically. He was usually a low-paid, seasonal wage laborer, way down the economic ladder. He typically owned almost nothing. Not the land he rode on, not the cattle he drove. often not even his own saddle. His skills were frequently learned from Mexican vaqueros. Economically, he was pretty disposable.
And the irony, as you mentioned before, is that his whole way of life depended on massive public infrastructure.
Completely. The entire cattle dry system only worked because of the railroads, often heavily subsidized by the federal government, that shipped the cattle to markets back east.
Yeah.
And crucially, the open range itself only existed because the U.S. Army had forcibly removed Native American nations from those lands. Government action created the conditions for the cowboy's job.
So the big takeaway here isn't about individual toughness, though that existed. It's that progress, civilization building, happens through these interconnected grids and the scaffolding that supports them. Maybe we should define those terms clearly for everyone listening.
Good idea. So think of the grid as the tangible network. The physical connections, trade routes, railroads, telegraph wires, the internet's fiber optic cables. And the scaffolding is the invisible framework that allows the grid to function or scale. It's the shared laws, the standardized weights and measures, the technical protocols like TCP/IP, the legal contracts, the banking systems, even shared cultural norms and trust.
Okay, that makes sense. The internet cable is the grid. The protocols that let computers talk to each other are the scaffolding. Can you give us a historical example of that scaffolding really making a difference?
Yeah, the Hanseatic League is a fantastic example. This was a powerful alliance of merchant towns, mostly in Northern Europe, that lasted for centuries, from roughly the 12th to the 17th century.
What did they do? What was their scaffolding?
Well, there were nearly 200 towns involved at its peak. They realized they were stronger together, so they standardized things, weights, measures, coinage making trade much smoother across all these independent cities. They shared vital information about markets and risks. They pooled resources to protect their ships from pirates. They even negotiated trade treaties as a single powerful bloc. They essentially built a massive platform of trust.
And that collective scaffolding made the whole network vastly more successful than any single city could have been alone.
Exactly. It multiplied the power of the grid. And importantly, when that shared scaffolding started to weaken due to infighting, changing trade routes, the rise of nation-states, the whole league eventually faded and collapsed. The grid couldn't survive without the scaffolding.
Which really brings us to today, doesn't it? This tension between the myth of the lone individual and the inescapable reality of our interdependence. It feels like a major leadership challenge right now.
It really is. You can't effectively design solutions for the future if you're stuck using a worldview that fundamentally misunderstands how progress actually happens.
And this leads to the next big leap you mentioned, moving beyond just knowing where we are like GPS does, to anticipating where we're going, mastering future time.
Right. GPS solved the "where am I now" problem. The next wave of synchronization seems to be about trajectory guidance, giving us not just a blue dot for our present location, but maybe a future dot showing likely paths ahead. It's about synchronizing across time, anticipating, and shaping what's next.
That sounds a bit sci-fi. How does that actually look in practice? What are some real-world examples?
Well, we're already seeing the beginnings. Think about smart traffic systems where autonomous vehicles don't just react to congestion, they coordinate with each other to proactively prevent jams from even forming. Or consider predictive health monitoring. Biosensors that don't just tell you you're sick, but detect subtle changes before symptoms appear and suggest microinterventions, maybe adjust your diet slightly, get more rest tonight to head off illness. It's collapsing future problems into preventative present actions.
Okay, I see. And what about the career side of things? That seems hugely relevant for listeners trying to navigate a changing world.
Definitely. Imagine platforms that don't just list current job openings, but analyze labor market trends to forecast skills that will be in high demand 18 months, 2 years, 5 years from now. And then they don't just tell you, they provide a personalized reskilling pathway. Look, this credential is going to be crucial. Here's a learning plan. If you start now, you'll be ready when the demand peaks.
That moves people from being reactive scrambling after a layoff to being proactive and resilient.
Exactly. Mastering future time, in this sense, is about building radical resilience, both individually and collectively. It's about anticipating change, not just reacting to crisis.
And there's a national example of this kind of proactive, collective resilience, isn't there? You mentioned Finland after the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yes, Finland's story is fascinating. When the Soviet Union, their main trading partner, collapsed in the early 90s, Finland's economy absolutely cratered. Unemployment shot up dramatically, over 16%. But their response wasn't just to bail out a few big companies or protect the old guard. Instead, they made huge strategic investments in universal education, in digital literacy for the whole population, and in strengthening their social safety nets.
So they acted like a massive equity multiplier, as you put it, investing across the entire grid, not just in a few key points.
Precisely. They essentially decided to upgrade the skills and adaptability of their entire population. They activated thousands and thousands of nodes across their national grid, and the result? They transformed themselves. They went from being heavily reliant on industries like paper and pulp to becoming one of the most digitally advanced societies in the world. Think Nokia in its heyday, the whole mobile revolution, the modern gaming industry.
Resilience didn't come from finding one hero or one magic industry. It came from strengthening the grid and the social scaffolding for everyone.
That's the key lesson. It wasn't about finding a single savior. It was about enabling widespread adaptation and innovation.
So we've traced this pattern from Harrison's brilliant mechanics, harnessing human ingenuity,
To the incredible precision of GPS, relying on atomic clocks and satellite technology.
and now looking towards systems that try to anticipate the future, maybe tapping into something like ecological rhythm or complex system modeling.
And it connects back to military strategy, too. Robert Leonhard, a military theorist, pointed out that modern warfare became about fighting by minutes, synchronizing actions precisely in time. Harrison's clock was really the ancient prototype for that kind of network-centric advantage.
It's amazing. We started with a clock designed to save ships from crashing into rocks. Today, we don't even think twice about trusting that little blue dot on our phone to get us to Starbucks.
Right. And tomorrow,
Yeah.
maybe we'll be carrying that future dot, that predictive guide, helping us navigate not just space, but the unfolding possibilities of time.
But the core lesson, the one that really sticks with me from all this, isn't actually about the technology itself.
No, I agree. It's fundamentally about how we organize ourselves as a society, that mythical cowboy story. It sells us the idea that being alone, self-sufficient, is strength and freedom. But the real history, the story of the grid and the scaffolding, shows something very different. It shows that being truly alone, disconnected, is actually profound vulnerability. It often means being disposable.
So here is our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away from this deep dive. Freedom isn't really found in the absence of support structures, the absence of scaffolding. Maybe true freedom is belonging to a scaffold that genuinely holds you up, empowers you, rather than one that just uses you up.
Yeah. So the question becomes, what scaffolding are you relying on right now, maybe without even realizing it? And maybe more importantly, how are you helping to strengthen the grid, the scaffolding for everyone else, for those who come next?